자시들의 되니다 되니 추초게 제시고리온 저와 세계 대사를 못지고 로지스마데 대사 성원이 엔데니 지랑가 대사 손은 간다 성대위도 추초게 되니 짐신 때를 때는 아까 야슈야와리 추초라 니 대인등가라 신남파겠다. 신저리당. 핀토리랑 알지 쇼죠 많이 되네. 추초가 까마도 잠들더니요. 색하시의 수진. 추초가 까마도 잠. 까마자자. 추초가 까마자자가 색하시의 수진.
다 konstruerar 신나. Dashi Deleng. So I'm going to say a few words about Rinpoche and some stories. And so the reason for doing that is because the center asked me, how about you tell a few stories? And so then I didn't feel like I have so many stories to say, but then because the center asked me to do it, so that's why I'm here now telling you some stories. I'm not sure if this is going to be of any benefit to you, but anyways, I'm following the request of the center.
Numbong Gar Shiba Jutin Gar Toki the Tambo tennis on those. Gar Shiba Teni told it any. Oh, tenetini, Numbong Gar Teta me part in the season any pula, Ramadan nature song at any Numbong Gara. De matter. Then it mean Pujin the main Numbong Gartula. Jasi may see among boson saritini, tenetini, Lombongark. Zone de Dutini, Sisatini, Contoyanian, Bonania Tesa, Jazogol, Mother Bachonetin, Sison, Tini, Lombongar, Tini, Dark, Jasas on Matotin, Garchima, Tambate, Tapu down in such a Jimbalto. The Tini Dar. Tarang moching garte denita ma kamso dege sola man charson netini dege jabu sesun thong sari dege jabu sesun thong netini tamboen garte mi meju mare chulok de sajain pare insari teni siso teni tam a khong sola pamne teni jiktin sungong jan teni dan jiktin sungong ga ta lopchi Nani tam, no cheese on the bananity, comes over the charde release. Young got you then.
I give a brief story of Garchen Rinpoche's previous life. So his line of incarnation goes back to the time of the Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo. And at that time, Garchen Rinpoche was born as the minister of that king, Minister Gar. And so then at that time, the kingdom of Tibet underwent many political hardships. And so there was a time then after the king had passed that Gar minister became like the ruler of the kingdom for some time, but there was too much turmoil, and so eventually he was toppled from that position, and he was sent away. So then he was sent off to a distant place, to the area of Dege in eastern Tibet. So it brought him all the way, so this kind of big topplement brought him all the way, and his family line then to the eastern part of Tibet, to Dege. And so then he was the king there, and then there was a prince born who was then the king, and so then the tradition kind of the Gar was sustained. And in terms of the Dharma, the family was initially Sakya lineage, and so later on, at the time of Chigden Sumgön, then there was Gar Trulpa, another birth of Garchen Rinpoche, and Chigden Sumgön had 3 main disciples, and so one of them then became Gar Trulpa. So then this is also how he entered the Kagyu lineage.
Gar Trulpa and Chigden Sumgön, and Pache Zepan Yamba na Yinchan be Deritini, Kong Sisutini, Lamala, Kong Tanya Salijon and Lamalandina, Young Kondo Gong, the Tambo. Sa tambo the pan zhong ta nie sa de nan zhong zhong long zhe di che le gong pa che jiao de ni si si pa ya long ko ni nen ta pa bo bo de ne de ni gong sa kong men kong den ti ja qian bo jia le ga qi den ba de ni kong ge da gong ba la da zhou ban ji di song kong ge la ma ba de ni kong da den da nyang kong do gong de ni kong pa tan yang sa pa ben Nang Kujabe. Zholong. Tani Yalong Kola Yang Gong Pache Oben. Tani Siso Yang Po Zosa Polo, Po Long Gong Zosa. Nagong Gonsa Jab. The Tini Dan got Chideng Patan, Dan Jeti Sung Gong Kete, Jeti Sungo Songsa, the Rapchuk Sampala, Tong Sarwa. Teni the Tan, Gargum Tank Tara, Yejuven and Gargona Jan Tarat, Larab Jail, La Holy Mother Demon, when if Chideng Panitin, Telemango, Chidok, Contain Chidok Jabdani, that's what Logi your money. Logi your money, last only. Teni, Jimsi Teltini, Garchideng Pa, Conetini, to make a trip. Pardon cook, Tapo, Tala, second Gar Tripsin Lagari, Matangal, Kongna, me, Tripsin main, that they started the negoci. Started negoci, and Gar Tripsin down. Then it do bag Samba Jari, Konami, then it started negotiating to Tatum, $10. Sankar, Sari, Nichin Sari, Samba Jari. Konamani Katini, Silent Ego Senate, Konan, Tatum $1, then Sankar Jubawa, Latin. Then it's on the Tenitara, Golama, Yon Pugal, Taranja, Latin, Charles John, Soxon, Soxon, Tatum, Soxon. Tanitara, Bo, Dog, Titula, Tilangat and Chang, Barbachimbo, Gardeura. Barba Chimbochek, Langakan. Teni, Barbal, Daven, Gogetson, Teni, Barbata, Dolan Jordan, did some parts of the Tatan Yaju. Sal, Langa. Yeah, lady. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Teni, the Kong, the Chinton Rupa, then Batan Tini, young logic la con Dang Himan Napa. Tini got shooting bag, the logic Kaya Yomari, Inaya Matini, Conga logic, Boba Plongon, Marin, Tanauri, Dole Conyon. Tini Plong Sanje, Lamachi, Conga La Jerisi, Plong Sanje, Lama Sanje, the Sicily. In Conjagal Persona, Sisa, to Lodi, Nabiela. Plong Sanje, Gumba the Tapo Plongum, Sisa, Gumbata for Kong Sarah. Anything the Congadal, Kong Jackson, a Congadan Gargalogi. Una Tangri, sitting at Jagala, Gupchokosona, Boche, Jagala Perua. Titular any Plong Sanje, parts of the Juke, Tavin. And at any Kayan Plong Sanji in the Pepsi Mado, Tenin, me the get Logia Cherama, something. Iron Gumpa Kong, Gujo Konga me. On top, Plong Gumpani in your merchant with Konga, there's a main him on Gargalogin the Tesa. Lab de Gerite, Colacajak Tinas, Sito goes on the Abungeni. They do Korantala Gabojin, the Nasoni. They Koran Dutch look at the Gargalogical Cheshin. No onion similar to Gajatinia, that Konga. The Gapo the Logite, no onion thing, God, Tripchin, Tripchin Chimbo, Tapi, Trapata, into that Chimbo change, the Rogue Lama in the Kong get the Namtan and Maloni. The logic Kong got Chudemba, and got Tripchin the Sangna, Durzala Pendos, Durzazin Hagora, Mugadin, being Deans on the Taranayi, Tangaso, Salo the Pevua, the Moja. I thought I'm lucky, Dingy Jan, the Garchima, Durzala way. The Sangna Perdon, Sangzena Pata, Sing Churimisa, the Nin Dopachanja is a Sangna. He did at the Nimbua Mambo Terry, then he Konga, Trotatone, then Durza, that Yala, the Beatam, Marchura, the some Mambo is, then that's all. Demon again, the Rexo, Demons in a Hakoi. Demon again, Gandos. Dona again, Kana again, Demon. Marima. Jala, this was Demon again, and no, Pemnos. Marima, Gali, Jabla Gali. Correct. Got it to King, to Tatum, console Gali. John Ponsumbo Mambola Gali. Money turned the water. Tatari Marta Chura Par, Tatari, and Conga Jala Yura, Demon again, Conga. They knows. To Demon Gali. Gardena Jabla Cornet Doji. Ya, Gardena. Ya. Jala Tato Mambo Yura, Jala Marta Chura. And Demon Cornet. This will to that on the TV and also. Conga to get that seaboating in those cities. Demon Congo. They know. Conga to that on the end on those. The Congi songs.
And so Gar Trulpa was one of the main disciples of Trigden Sumgön, the heart son. And so after a while, so they stayed in a kind of similar area. They stayed together close by. And so after a while, even though Gar Trulpa was actually the disciple of Trigden Sumgön, and very soon his activities became, Gar Trulpa's activities became really vast, and they almost became the same as Trigden Sumgön's. And so then he couldn't stop that, and so he felt that that is not good because that's my guru, and it shouldn't look like I'm like competing with my guru, and therefore if that goes on and there's more and more activities and people come to me, then I better go somewhere else. So then that's why he left Trigden Sumgön, and he moved somewhere far away to Jigong Dolong, and then he built a monastery there, and also in Yalang, he built a monastery there, and then another one he built in a place called Bowo, and where he built the Pulong Gompa monastery, and so that was. Also, Thigden Sumgyen was born in the 16th century, so that was around that time. And so when we count the 13th?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, 13th century, sorry. It was the 13th century. So, 800 years, right? So now if we count the incarnations of Gar Rinpoche, so now we say that Gar Rinpoche is the 8th Garchen Rinpoche, but this is the counting for the 8th Garchen Rinpoche actually only starts with the foundation of the Gar Monastery. So with the first Gar at the Gar Monastery, that was the first Gar, and then the second and so forth. So actually, Gar Chudingpa was way before that. So that's why actually if we would count all the way back, way beyond Gar Monastery, then we would have like 16, right? What, do you say 16? 16, right? Yeah. Then we would have around, not so sure, but around 16 incarnations actually of Garchen Rinpoche. And so now coming to Gar Chudingpa, Gar Chudingpa was a really accomplished master. And so they called him actually the Gar Dubchen. Dubchen also means the Mahasiddha. And he practiced meditation and retreat in Tsarim. Also, there was another Drukpa Lama called Tsampa Gyari. And so there was one miracle, that kind of miraculous sign that Gar Chudingpa displayed, and that was he also had his walking stick, and he hit the ground with his walking stick. So I'm sorry. So the story that happened first, there was a frog. Apparently, it must have been a really huge frog, because it blocked the entire road. And so then Gar Chudingpa couldn't pass by because the frog was blocking the road. And so he had his walking stick, and he kind of stabbed the frog. But then the frog turned into rock, right? So and it's still there now, so it can be actually seen. So there's basically a stone frog is right there. That was one of his miraculous signs. And so so regarding Gar Chudingpa, actually, there's not a lot of stories about his life, and we've heard that at Bowo Pulong Monastery, there might be some stories about him. And so there was this Lama Sangye from the Pulong Monastery. He was contemporary with Rinpoche, and he came to India. And we thought that if we asked him, then he might know something. So in 1993, Rinpoche traveled to India, and we went with him. So we thought that we were gonna try to find him, to talk to him, but then we heard that he had already passed away, so we couldn't talk to him. And so then we went to, was it Ayang Monastery, right? And so then there we were told that there is this like old man from Pulong, and he might know a few stories. So maybe you should go ask him. And so then Abo and myself, we talked to this old man. We asked him, do you know anything about the Gar history? And so he said that Gar Dubchen, or the Mahasiddha Gar, which was Chudingpa, was a very accomplished Mahasiddha that displayed many miraculous signs. And so then he told us a few stories which he was reading to us. And so, and he told one story where Gar Chudingpa was invited to, there's these nomads who invite the Lama to maybe give teachings and have like a ceremony. So he was invited to this very high desert nomadic land where there was just nothing there, completely barren land. And so then he went there, and he wanted also to bring a few offerings. Like he had some things like a few objects, and he had some like butter and milk and this kind of like a creamy milk and a cheese. And so his vehicle basically to carry all of his baggage was a grizzly bear. So everybody was very stunned by that, because that was really a miraculous sign that he would use the grizzly bear basically like a mule or so to carry all his things and walk right next to him.
Yeah, the two take letter, Kong the Gong like Yodel to Latini, Chopar and Boche, Yotin, Drone, Tilla, Yodel Tinin, Chopar and Boche, and said that should sort the ring. Dramugo Kari, Drachimbo, Kari, Mugo, Trasona, Machiga Golambi, my own song, that Andoa, no Trafata, Sella, Soma, Sella. That kind of Salami, my own sort of son, Kambanani Salto, my own love. Down it, Kangal Gate Jabby, Kangal to do Datanguna, and Joparan Bochi, Salto, my own. Zengusong, main TV, Datang the Tini, Garchudeng Palt, Gate Amodoa, Garchudeng Pala. Nacho the Kong de Duni or the Sal. Garchideng, but the Duni Nacho, Yecomena hinge, see him here. See him here, that conquer that chessing the Marisa, then they get on in Chupon Ura, take a tenny Kong get on Mudara. Then it made cause Dajamada. Kong Dama Jam de Tenny, Sina contain that Jasa put under. Then it Mokanga said, Consokun made. 강연마에 진박그 강연마에 됐더니 휴대박 쓰인다라대 다대 쓰인됐더니 쪼빠를 뭐 지다 좀 청구하냈더니 저 첨보제 그랬더니 맹 까공는 아대외로라 대민 거게 까공는 거자후 그랬더니 휴대박 그때에도 콩 대마타됐더니 총을 쫄는 가르잖아 쫄네 더니 저 삐야리 저 삐야리 the Nurve, they did look and no room chivura. Any no rotten bula, you damn me that are a hakoma, uncle get to that and reject to it. No tap food, I mean, they do. Pacher put it isn't. Chupun get there, madam. Garchideng Balacon, I'm sure seeing the Maris and gay madam, and Chideng Bak seeing the owner to Kong. Them they Kaya Sigmarua. Then it should get Chubunka came out on the dinner take home. Got a good talks on it.
And then so the one time Garchi Dingpa was actually then at the same place in Jigong, close to Jigong Til with Jigten Sumgun again. And so there was one time that where Jigten Sumgun sent his shrine master attendant out to tell everybody, I'm going to make a lot of noise very soon. And when you hear the noise, don't come out. Just stay where you are in your rooms and do not leave your room. So that was the order for every monk in a monastery. But so then the attendant said, well, there is no need to tell Garchi Dingpa, because Garchi Dingpa actually already in this lifetime he had problems with his ear. So he was basically half deaf at the ear and he wouldn't hear much. So then the attendant said that there's no need to tell him, he won't hear anything anyways. So that's why he was not told. And so then that night then there was a really loud noise coming from Jigten Sumgun's hut, his cabin, and nobody else left their rooms, but Garchi Dingpa did in fact hear it. And so then he was looking out and he saw that there was a huge snake kind of looking into the window, Jigten Sumgun's window, kind of sticking its head inside the window. And so then Garchi Dingpa wanted to save Jigten Sumgun, of course, and he went there and he took the snake away and he kind of threw it out. And so actually it was said that this was a Naga who actually came to offer a jewel to Jigten Sumgun. So nobody really knows whether there really was a jewel, but this is how the story goes.
Lodge that any tenet in it. Oh, Tini Paltin, Lodge Chayo Mariti, got Gargona din Sajankin, got in Zen Panso in Sarva, got in Zen Panso Conte in the Tinicon, Tani Con, Mambo, and it's a Pevsam Con, Majority Con, Tan Gargon, Yeons, Gariti, Yeon, Pevsam, Con, Sin, Zemded. The knee Con, Chai, Ham Kayatini, Porsona. Go Ganya, Lasso. Lord, seen an equal there. I'm go Ganya to Lass on the Tini Hung, Senang, Gang Chung Chung Jabdo. Sachatana, Gang Chung Chung. Tini Gang Sachatana me, the Tinicon, Yasatini, Tini, Gang Chung Chung Jab the Tini, Watchex, Giura. Tini Kongata. Wa ke ji te kawa song de te khong hang ka ya yo le ka ya yo ma de ni te phep song de te ham ka ya de ni al gong na ya ya dara gong pha ja sa de hang ko ka ya de wa ke ko song ya ni te ni ta al gong de ni te ta gong pa thong ma de ya ga ten zen pha.
And so this is that story that we heard of Gar Trulpa, and really no other stories really were preserved. And then we come to the founding of the Gar Monastery, and the first incarnation of Gar who founded the monastery was Gar Tenzin Phuntsok. And so there was a time where he stayed kind of close to Gar Monastery, and one time at night he was sleeping. And so then when he woke up, then his shoe was gone. And so he was actually, coming from the Bo, the Palong, the previous monastery. So he was actually traveling from that area to Nangchen. So then he was already in Nangchen. So that night he was sleeping, and then he woke up, and his shoe was missing, and it had snowed a little bit. And when he was looking around, he saw the footprints of a fox in the snow, and he was wondering where that would lead. So he followed the footprints, and that brought him to where currently, right now, there's the Upper Gar Monastery. So of course there was nothing there at that time. But it was the fox who had taken his shoe, and the fox brought the shoe to the location of the present day Upper Monastery. So this is then where he started the Gar Monastery.
Trong the Taram Manero watching on to that Macheba. Then it tennis on the time, Mantanga Jello, the chase on Mato, no Nisha Latini, Macheba tennis on it. So he did that, got in them Pantota, Chamira as a Konabak, Yampoto.
And so Gar Tenzin Phuntsok was contemporary with Chagme Raga Asya, and Chagme Raga Asya came to spend some time with him, and then together they did a lot of retreats at Gar Monastery. For example, the Goya Samaja, the Rech and Rezik practice, and also they did retreats to consecrate the Mani pills during the 100 million Mani recitation retreat. So the pills that were produced at that time by Tenzin Phuntsok and Chagme Raga Asya are the same pills that Garchen Rinpoche is now still passing out to his students. So it's as always part of the batch that's still contained in the present pills. So the line goes back to the time of Gar Tenzin Phuntsok and Chagme Raga Asya. Sorry, except for 20 years. That's the only time when it was not produced, which was during the Cultural Revolution, 58, and then 20 years.
No, tini da tini pala. Tang garke din sajam tini pal teri te la sisola tini garke te lojula ke chimbo imba. Te tonhang se si me ti. Tang gartin Rinpoche tarat ni pala lojun gargung loju mine kare song imba te shepta yo mari. Ye to de kanyo yo mari. Mendo. Tini tini tarak Rinpoche ta kumcheng Trulpa chuji nima. Gar chuji nima shuji kong. Tini ta niri dari kong. Ta chezo kola demcho tong chuksam. Tini ta dewe ne ta nenang le yung ta chugu nizel langi tewa song li to konyo. Chugu de na nizel nima sel nima shang kodwa. Tini konga chugu de ndiriwi nima sel ndiriwi di tawa na cha tewe di chugu de tarang gargung na yori. Kong kumten Trulpa ri dara gargung tara. Chang genje yu mishi tarang guru Rinpoche la chugu de soryal de tal teri. Margung la guru coaching jara song. Tachirang tongna song jim lakang na yori. Di chugu de nizel langi dukji chugu de tara yori. Kundala soryal. Gargung banana. Samjuksa tara nenang anigum pabjab dara. Tiya lotana chinese kundanoa. Ta o tena tana yu. Demcho tong chuksam dongsa. Demcho tong chuksam. Lo kase.
So then he was the one who started the monastery. And so that's the was important story. And so then not each of the Gar that followed Tenzin Phuntsok, actually, again, not a lot of stories actually remain. There's not a lot of stories about each of the Gar incarnations. There's one story about the sixth Garchen Rinpoche of Chogi Nyima. And Chogi Nyima practiced, 100 million times, some 13, I guess it's 1,300 million. It's around, definitely over 1 billion Chakasambhara mantras. And so after having accomplished that, he developed some CDs. And so one time he took off his Dharma robe, his Dharma robe shawl, and when the sun was shining, there was a sun ray, and he used the sun ray as a kind of hanger. So he hung up his Dharma robe on the sun ray, and it just stayed there, like it's a real thing. And that Dharma robe is still at Gar Monastery. At the Gar Monastery, there is a statue of Guru Rinpoche, and this statue is dressed in that, kind of wrapped in that Dharma robe. And so, yeah, Chogi Nyima did that retreat at the Gar Nunnery.
Tini konga tara saji ratare tara jarjuri gargunga ani gumpatsuli chutinje uri tinan donyo echela trakonan chutinje tanan jarjuri saji sagiji tanula chutinje saji konga saji ya.
Also, at the close to the nunnery where he did his retreat, the sixth Garchen Rinpoche, Chogi Nyima. Currently, right now, there is a stupa there, and there is also a cave, and that was his practice cave. And in that cave, there is a handprint of Gar Chogi Nyima.
Deni kong shangna pebde deni konga kodong de deni ta deni tawache urura. Tata kende kalla kan deni sa garguni dong la kindo so kodong de dragong ko la sa dragong tella tawate ke kalla kan kache kar ya chekla ya kar deni korange ya titi no so de deni korange ta ya te kawa ni sonati tena ni re ho Kora Temari Yat Gadin Dona, Kora Yamdo Setini, young their tongue che de thing, the non color to do is on the Tavamang Bogozo. Gargun Nia Lasandro. Then he conga takes and down Tala is on the down Tigata, Chijinim down the Marita, Korangam, Mad Zumache, Pumboke, the Matorica Landua. Then it don't make by Junera. Then now can Jack Council. Jack the council the Yanzap Lajun and Terem Yanzap Lajun and Nancy Jatung running Garchima and so on. The details on this. Go down to the Charlies.
And so then when Gar Nima passed away, then it was decided that his body would be brought to Jigong Til, which was quite far away. It was in the Lhasa area. And so a monk was sent with the body and a yak. So the body was placed on the yak, and then the monk would go next to the yak. And basically, whenever the yak didn't feel like walking, then they just had to rest. Whenever the yak was tired or wanted to sleep and didn't want to walk, then also the monk couldn't make the yak go. So anyways, that's why it took a really long time. And they arrived only several months later in Lhasa. So he was still carrying the body. And then by the time they got to Jigong Til, then the people didn't believe him anymore that this is in fact Gar Nima. And they said, this is not real. He's trying to cheat us. And so then they just treated the body like any other body and set it on fire. And when it went into flames, the entire sky was filled with rainbow lights. And actually in the Yangsap lineage guru, there's a supplication that we read. So in there, actually he's mentioned as the Gar Siddha, he's called the sun ray Siddha because of the city that he did with the sun ray as a hanger. So the sun ray Siddha, who the rainbow like Samboga Kaya sun ray Siddha, who kind of overpowers or pervades all of appearance and existence.
Korang sitting gargon talks and on Yarte. Korang chibondos. Gargon lebso. Then he sees that Napu Chung to Kambachin and Got Jetaya Korang main Yati main Nakshu Shandingo dollars. Yakin go con main Nati Nakshu Shandingo. The Korang main Yati main. Nakshu there is such a inside. Shandingo then a Korang mainly. And they didn't go to Putia Yuri and Kambachi, Gala, and go to Tayo. Did that Kavayu Hakomas of Dingo? Mari, go Gompagati.
So then the yak, the yak who brought the body, the yak then that turned around and he went back to Gar Monastery all by himself. And he actually arrived back at Gar Monastery eventually. And then they kept that yak's head. And when I was young, when I was very young at the monastery already, in my room actually, I had that yak hanging on the yak's head, hanging on the wall. What was his name? Lakshu Shando.
Lakshu Shandingo.
Shandin. Oh, Lakshu Shandengo. That was his name. It's a place of like Lakshu it doesn't mean anything. It's just the name of a place. So it was in BuNima's room. So in another room at the monastery, but he saw the yak's head. And he doesn't know where it is now.
야, 되니 디콩니 되니 다라다 뭐지 거고마 간틀레용 잡으라 간틀레용 잡나 되니 콩네다 되니 무실라 토바메 봐 되니 콩전에다 다라 콩게디 주바 저건데는 창망 이해사리 창망 보세 되니 군파 난 소드라 창망 보지다 소로벌라 제라 뭐죠 다티를 욕되오나 잼도 뭐죠 사리와 창기 용도 뭐죠 사리 되니 콩네 뭐시 토바메 바더니 콩 사리 되니 콩게 다라 수실리들라 차바죠 자긴제우리 차바죠 자긴제우라 콩갈 틀레용 잡시합서 파서 망본 노령다라 노령다 되 콩가다 데드 맞아 콩나 차가 저기 송 차가들라 차가 데 콩가다 다 잠봉 거다 단 주야보용 거면도 다 자마래 건도 송더니 샤욕될 때더니 공차 송더니 참참 잼서는데 공차 송그리지 공차 달래는 것도 야보용 거면도 송더니 참참 그러니까 말이 틀레용 잡 다라 꼭고 말이야 더니 잠매용 거 용건도 다 영건도 다 야보온 거면도 두야보온 거면도 다 대오 차금도 좀 되니 콩거 송거리지 되니 콩건 참참 늘 신디라 그리 너들 마샤솔 카딘 너들 참참 너들 팽거도 송 신디가 늘 신디라 그리 맨나 신디들 저자 말이 콩거 다 샤솔 마데 참참 너들이 되니 다 아웅나 데 샤소네 아용 코라 자마 콩게 대디니다 자마 몽 코달레제 호리 다나 니 자마테 무슬레야 데타 뭐 지금이다 같이는 뭐 따라 고노니쇼 나니 마도 마스 부나나 랩토 말에 콩게 로이 섬치 집중문이 잭차리 이제 잭차로 콩게 음식 다야 본 거면 다 들어가서 다 콩 시나 말이 참사다 콩나는 창 도로나 다 초방아 촌 초대나 콩게 농파송하면도 잼대 그랬어요. 난 차서나 차가라 잼대. 응 참칼도 송은 이 공차 송은데 다라데 공창 당조라는 거네. 공창 당나 공미 당조도 다라데인데 뒤뒤라 컨트롤 잡이 잡데니라 공미 당 그 야나데 정도라 되니 콩거들 다 공창 당조를 내면 그다래 콩거 공 되니 다 대디양 뽕 그만달 콩거 대리는 진짜로 공창 당하고 다라잖아 용되는 공창 당하고 막 그떤 초카가 리퍼블릭 데모크라니 가가 된다고 그래 봐. 근데 자리 근데 대민 다라 대 공민당 따바카 봐. 공창당제는 야나가 다한 마시고 따와서 되리. 이 콩거 되리니 공차 송거리지. 되니 자말래 건도 다야 본 거도 다. 콩 차바 콩도 송도 차가 송 콩샵을 봐. 콩거 동송거 차바 콩거 콩 다른 뭐지 저 중앙는 같이 뭐지 패찬 로지 이럴 테니 콩 음식은 면 내비티 딱이 마랑식을
So, now coming to Garchen Rinpoche's previous incarnation, Gar Yongkyab. Gar Yongkyab was known for having unobstructed clairvoyance, but also he was known for his improper behavior. He was actually quite a drinker. He drank a lot of chang, beer, Tibetan alcohol, in the monastery too. So sometimes he would sit on the throne and everybody would do recitation. He would not recite anything. He would just be too drunk. And then he would just nod off and he would just sleep there. But still his clairvoyance was unobstructed. And so he had this attendant monk called Chaka. Actually, when... So his real name was Trulpa, but then Trulpa Yongyap called him Chaka. So Trulpa was the attendant and of Gar Trulpa Yongyap, and we actually had met him because when I met him, he was a very old monk already. And so at that time of Gar Trulpa Yongyap, so there was this one time again where Gar Trulpa Yongyap was drunk and yes, yeah. So he did not just stay one time, and he also was just drunk one time. So there was one of those times, and it happened again and again, where he was drunk, and he kept saying this thing that people thought he was drunk, but so he was kind of drunk, and he was nodding off and sitting on the throne, and he would just kind of ramble, and then he would say something like Chaka, like calling for his attendant, and then he would say, things will not be good, bad times are coming. So the Gongchang are coming. And so the Gongchang are the communists. It's like there are basically two parties, something like Republican and Democrat or so, basically two opposing parties at that time in China. And there was the Gongchang and the Gongmechang. And so the Gongchang were the Chinese, the communist Chinese, which are now ruling the country. And then the Gongmechang were kind of the nationalists who then later went to Taiwan. So they were the enemies of the communists, right? So at that time, when Gar Trulpa Yongyap was alive, it was actually the Gongmechang, so which would be the nationalists, those who wanted, those who later went to Taiwan. So those were actually in control at that time when Trulpa Yongyap was alive. So nobody was really talking about the communists, the Gongchang, but he would say, the Gongchang are coming, they're coming from the east, and then he would have this kind of like a stick like this, so he was drunk, right? So he would just like kind of snap it away, and toward the eastern direction. He would just fall in the eastern direction, and so that was, and he did that many times actually, and he knew that like an invasion will come, but that was actually 30, 40 years before anything happened, because he was still alive, and it was only when our present Garchen Rinpoche was around 20 years old that really the communists invaded. And so then after this Garchen Rinpoche was released from prison, about 1 year after Rinpoche was released, this is when the old monk, Trulpa, he then passed away, but I've known him. Lama titula tini sacha dokam zo satana kong namba tsokwa nyam pung tso yin song tini titula pe dokha chalo sako we kong namba de ma rogi de cha do chi be ti song tini tlein chap kun doin na phpa chen do song phpa chen do de kong ge chol lang de tini ro we di de tini o thang na cha jap ti song thang dain cha khal sai jap ti ya nya tu titula mak thoya ke tini dog thang na song song la phân đấu gì là cho anh sẽ giao thế hiện đến đầu đến một bộ lần thông sang miền rồi là cho cái thằng một bộ đầu đến một bộ thông đến là cho miền trong thằng càng càng đến đầu đến một bộ và nên đầu cái rồi bắt đầu miền là đầu bắt đầu
minge yong munendo then rupa yo ta nga som hin yong nan ten de la de ngo yo wa te and pu ge de yong nan te ngo yo wa thong ho le then ni te ang se dan se de ang ngo sa chen ro sa ma le wa te la yim se te te ni te la gin san ji ke kong le ken ko te ta lo ji to ni to song song chale yung ja ko te de nang song si 말이 탕 나성 드니 암 로성지라 양 남갈 이렇게 침보냐 네 드니 제 차지 된다
So actually the incarnations, the lives of Garchen Rinpoche were all Mahasiddhas, and so now there was still at the time of Gar Trulpa, so there was another Garmakagi Turkum Sangye Tenzin from a Garmakagi monastery, and so at that time he was a very young Turkum, and Gar Trulpa was already an elder, high lama, and so one time they did kind of a retreat together, kind of a group, a puja together, and so they went together to Dojim, and did the group practice there, the puja, and a thunderstorm broke out. And in Tibet, when a thunder is considered to be a dragon, so that they actually see the dragon in the sky. So then they decided they can't stay here. There's many people in Tibet who have seen the dragon actually, and so actually, maybe I mentioned that now. So it's not just like a kind of a folk's tale or something, but actually there are stories where in the Tibetan medicinal scriptures it actually mentions that one of the ingredients is the dragon bone. And so it's not that they just saw the dragon flying in the sky, but they actually sometimes brought the dragon down. And when the dragon came down, then they would use part of that dragon's bone to prepare medicines. So probably that would not that would be in the West. Maybe people wouldn't really believe it. Yeah. So anyway, so coming back to that story, so there was this. Basically, the people saw that there's this dragon, right? So it was a thunderstorm, and they thought they would have to break down their tents and everything. And then Trulpa Yongkyab had this kila, this purpa in front of him, and he picked that up, and then he rolled it in his hands, and then he threw it down. And when it hit down the ground, then he just threw it on the ground, and when it hit the ground, that brought the dragon down. So the dragon came straight down to the ground, but then it took off again. So it flew away, but anyways, there was no more thunderstorm. And so that was the story that the Garmakagi Lama, the Lama Sangye, he told that story. Sangye Tenzin, he told that story. Yeah.
Rang Kimbo Samrup, Sati Sajatan Yogos, Yamal Sajagamina. Yamal Tinitana Yogde da Tinikong Nakong, na Yogitini, Marketini Kong Dana, Corbiti song. Aderimbochegitini, Corbitiatini, da Kong Arak Zante, Deri Aratamapala, Vina Tramakade, the Kongata, Shifunang. Arat Ramadan Shimata Dado Kong Shifunang Shifunang Ten Kong Katase Project Nang Pumdi Nang Teni Deve Sonteni Majima take Constant Kong Mandapache in Sari, Kong Tukache in Sarile, Senemoka, the Lapti Kong Dogo Song City, the Kong Adamboche may Munzang money. In Tulaim Chapka de Dunicong, Tukata Mandava Tuka. Aderimbochian, see that Conga didn't go on the release.
What the Kale in the Pura, then Kata Sabo Yo, then
Kata Sabo Yo, Pundi, Sabo Yo.
You might have heard of Ade Rinpoche. Ade Rinpoche also told one story that he could remember. So Ade Rinpoche was a friend of this Garchen Rinpoche. And so when Ade Rinpoche was very young child, at that time Trulpa Yongkya was older, and so at that time Trulpa Yongkya stayed in Gyalma, which is actually the birthplace of Khenpo Samdrop. And so at that time Trulpa Yongkya stayed there, and Ade Rinpoche's mother brought the young Ade Rinpoche, but of course he was not recognized yet or anything. He was just a baby basically. He was like a toddler and not recognized or anything. But the mother just brought him there, and they entered his kind of room in the dark, and he just remembers this like smell of alcohol everywhere. And then Trulpa Yongkya, he look at the child, and then he like spit on him with, and it kind of is kind of mixed with alcohol and saliva, and then he wrapped the yellow golden kadag around him, and he gave him like a yellow, like a kind of a string that he wrapped around him, that kind of his neck for protection, and so that was definitely a sign that he knew that this is a very special being. He already knew it at that time, but at that time, Ade Rinpoche was not yet recognized.
Okay, then Chilean chapter, then Kongata, Omata, Mamboyu, Misitating Kong Loma, so the Teningala, Chimidorjita, then Alec Dingy, Kong Namba, inside Dingy. Dingy Kong that the Gandre Chow Misitating Chimidorji, the Ningachin Bochi Lomari, Gachin Chilean chapter Loma, Kong. Naro Chudo, Lot Jokes on my zone. Then he called me, come back, Sanang Madrelli. Then it means Shabjit Tata and Jarjova. Then the Conta, and Yamachi Latini, Kong Shabjijo, Smith or Jack Kong Shabjijo, and Hatio. Then Yamachi Latini, Teleon Chap Kong, Choking Gargon, Taraflang, Televa, Teleon Chap, 8 lang and all. Kong Smith or Jojo to Sanita. The Shablo Jablotana, Kambachi, Malgona, that the Nipali added Nisho Unamina, Mato Yumari, Jonga Nisho Mato Yuma, Gumpatan Kong, some kind of Yad Nisho Zamato Sama. The Nikon, Yamato Chimito Jeta, mean some kind of family, Chilean Chakape, Gajo Tangandosi, Chuta Lomambo Tesal Day. Then it should that came a military chas on it. Con don't see it as on. Then Chimido Jeketa met the poema, then Lamaldo are gone shouted, Garigaganism. Then young Samson, young children bought a Gajo Tangandosi. Then young Samson Palm Pebrodos. Then young child Gajo Tangan, you must have a pap paper yatini con. I didn't down go on the pen down Gajo down the end of sea. Gajo down the con the church Gajo down the city. Kong jokes at and Dojim on the Sarva, and Chimito jokes at Gohatan. Then it did Neveta, Namatic cat. In Gigio, you want something, Kong did Dodicana, Archie grounded, Kong, Gamba, Socks on the G. Shabjit Jan, and you got it. Jan the Tini, Yate, yeah. Those are the something Conga Pa Dematari Alojaviani, Mantonga Zine. Kajuta. That Nikon young shed, that thing that Kong take my song gone. Then Pap Alojaviani. Alojavia the Tini, Kong art peps on the yoke there. Yoke the Tini, young, playing your pep de Dasira. Young Kong paying with the Gajo down paying with us. Then you go around and the Tahito, the telecom, the Congress, the help down of that. Then he and then I tell Cheve that I did. Then you Congress, Shabjit is the later. The Tini to pep songs. The Nita Conga, that continue, the Dita Lama Gonta, Conterish Shabji. yo to the thing, draw tone da gong, they kong te gajo down the or song. Tele gajo down my song, they chap ya, then kong. Then tell him, Jimmy Dojim, then kong come back, go ja, that go ja, send ya yana, kong come back at all your money. Sell pebble, Santari. Tell you, Mario Jimmy Dojim. Ah. Salal pebble. Me 장군 도고 말고 막 이막 그 공자 잡야나 대면 맞추려고 하려 콩나는 용도라 콩더니 겐 공자 잡yan 더 까터요 말이 가사 그 산타리 팸로 또 지미도 이제 콩 상황을 팸로 상황을 팸로 되니 따라 콩 고마다 야나면 되나 탱 야나 마시 되니 양막 막공 콩 욕살아 욕되네 근데 들어왔더니 콩가 로마다 근데 자리에 센트레인 로마 당니 라마 이거 로지 시니가 다야오라 당 라마다 로마 이거 괜찮아 대 만대 맞으로지
So now we come to the story of the Lama and the disciple. The disciple of Trulpa Yongyap. So of course he had many disciples, but his main disciple was Gar Dojim, and also there was Lama Denki Rinpoche, but it was mainly really Gar Dojim. And Gar Dojim practiced the 6 yogas of Naropa in retreat for 13 years, and he developed siddhis. For example, he was able to just walk through the wall without any obstruction, and he also placed a footprint and so on that can still be seen. And so at that time he stayed at the Gar Monastery. So he stayed, Garchima Dorje at that time stayed at the lower Gar Monastery, and then Gar Trulpa Yongyap, his guru, stayed a little bit above, but not that far. It was like maybe 20 yards or so away, so quite close by. And Jima Dorje's hut was there, so he stayed there. And Trulpa Yongyap would always come and scold him, and he would, he told him, now you've practiced meditation for that many years, been in retreat for that many years, and you don't even have one single sign of accomplishment to show, not even one siddhi. And so then every time he came, he would say something like that, and he would yell at him, and he would kind of humiliate him and really insult him. And Jima Dorje felt really sad, and he thought that I'm making my guru upset. And sometimes he would cry, and then Trulpa Yongyap would come again. And sometimes when he left, he would just leave cursing. And when he was already up at his room, he would still hear him cursing at him. And so this one time then, after he still heard him cursing up there, so Jima Dorje had this huge boulder, kind of huge rock in front of his hut. So he was sitting there and just listening to his guru leave, scolding him and cursing. And so then he, at once he got up on both his legs on that boulder, and that left 2 footprints in that boulder. So there was his siddhi, but then again, he wasn't so sure about that, because he thought that anyways the guru will not be happy either way. So he said, that's no good, he must not see that. So he's trying to hide it, and he put some earth and dirt over it so that the guru wouldn't see that. And so then again, Trulpa Yongyap came back again cursing and looking around. And so then of course he knew, and he kind of wiped away the earth, and then he saw the footprints, and then he screamed out, laughing, haha, there it is, the siddhi. And so that was the end of cursing and scolding him. So then he had his sign, and so so basically Jima Dorje, that's where he stayed. And he stayed at the lower monastery, but every night he would go up to turn the Gyanama, the prayer wheel, and then he would go back down. And he was really a Mahasiddha who would just sometimes they would lock him in his room so he couldn't go out with a key. They kept the key, like the monks, right? They kept the key, and he would just go out anyways, just going through the wall. So he was unobstructed, and he also put those footprints into the boulder.
Magali tepayu devan tepa mini kiyang korangata soni koma govimona machangche koma chorsona in chimi dorji go sonjari lagris. Gangisina korang gonja jabjana tugamari, any shondogari, korang govelangery, basha, magali catedra lama yuris. Mamankum, sorry gagayu, sorry magama, tepa mi don't. And
so at that time, Jimmy Dorje's powers were a little bit controversial because there were some people who had devotion in him, but then there were others who were suspicious of his powers. And so any time in town when something was lost or like somebody's house was broken into and things were stolen, he would be accused because he was known for just being able to walk through the walls. So he might as well just go through the wall, take a few things and leave again without even breaking down the house. So every time something like that happened, they would say, oh, probably Jimmy Dorje came to get miraculously to steal our things. And he has these powers and he's probably misusing them. So there were these two kinds of people.
Nida Chimidorjita, up to Nabil, they call Zongson Rajak, Zongson Chamdor Tason, Chamdor Jaja, the no Napa Jaja Yora, Jaja, then Zonkana, your Konga Kanga, Sarshik, then a Soyo Kong Salapebra Yono. Salola, Jajana, Mampi, Kayan to go, Jaja to go. Pete, then is your Tenikong. The new mambo the thing tama tapagadami. Tapaga to do the thing, then it cha mambo, but there is a tenny, she's a tat, and they take on some of the Chamdolan days, Chamdon days. Then she's a soon song get to the tapa, the Sara, sorry, the sort of ringset, and told the nose. Tapala, and those. The jacket to the Jacket and Maru Kong, Salpandotini, in your maternity Sundays. To do you know the Jamkazon. There's such a cham, that's not in Chamdon.
In 1958, Garchima Dojim was arrested by the communists, by the Chinese, and put into the concentration camp, and that was in Chamdo. And so they would put him into handcuffs. They were made of solid iron, and it wouldn't take long for him to just take them off again himself and then go through the wall and go somewhere else. They had a really hard time containing him in the prison. They would try to lock him down, and many shackles and handcuffs. Nothing. Every time they would put something on, before you know it, he had them off already, and he went elsewhere. And so then they tried it with ropes. So they bound the rope so tight that it would cut into his flesh, and he was bleeding. So that's how they tried to restrain him. And so eventually, he passed away like that in the Chamdo prison. And he passed away sitting in meditation posture. And so later people said that when they then they got some of the part of the rope that he was bound with, and they found there were relics inside that rope because the rope was cutting into his flesh.
Ni Gar Rinpoche, then telling chapter Yansi, Garchima Rinpoche, then Garchima Rinpoche, then it Gargati, Gargum Tremzona, Jiglet, Jupala, Jupas, Yata, Yatra, that Chicle Chia Chicle, control it, Garchen Rinpoche, the Rinpoche, Commantong, Gonsi, the Gantrele, Gar Rinpoche, Yapsang, Pedara, Pedar, the Nikong, the Yapsang, the main Teleon Chabla. The Sampaloxa Kuma, Zutini, Kuma, Yapoje Zutini, Zampat, the Gano de Tinikoma, Tele Yonchala Parera, Parunditini, Tintele Yonchabeta, then they taran Kongan Nangame, then the Mount Quality Chancel, Chitsana, Jawach, Yapoji Yongri, the Detailer, Person the Konakas, May Sonera, then May Tara. Yapsang Tezon, the Sisota, Yapsang, Gar Rinpoche, Tenantoni, sitting, Gar Rinpoche, control the Nikon, Nata Chukun, Bochung, Kashi Azari, Rinpoche, Bochung, Saloni, Demote, the whole, Demote, the Kong, parts of Petra cut, then Bulesata, Gono Yanasa, Karisina, and Sadara, then the Teni. Yamatigotini, Dara, Drapalo, Pagin down, the Manerinazo, young Koransotan, Lombata Rimboli, Consultant, Dropali, Rimpoche Yapsang, San, Yufarwash, Simban Neta, Yomatan, Draches Agri, Taratan, Dropak, Consupatan de Satin, young Martan, Betan, Shat and Romato, Chunioma, then Consul Asset Songia on the David Conti. Control lot of buying and the whole summary, something Sonja the whole salary. Manner in Natan, then the Palo de Pagina, Conam Jan, the whole that they community, Sona Sonto, Rimpoche Yapsangana, Nathan David, the poor Chungum, Consul Zemote, the Denny, Zemo the Conitana Hale, the Nipo Jaka. Ama, manner in a letters in cities. Manarina let the sea amal go see here. Then the pugging take two man and you take a Kadishigri cities. Kadishing, who take a Kadichan Shigri like this. Who take Kadishigri, Kadin. May I have called mine and then Pugan Tong Mamuna. Then it made it to the entire Rinpoche Tendoma, the Puga Tedini, Manamina, Rinpoche, Mushika Gonsai.
Rinpoche Amatina Song.
Rinpoche Amal to the Ama Man let Dasi, none of the Majimba check a lot, and Korangata.
So it is said that each of the incarnations of Garchen Rinpoche it is better than the one before, so more accomplished and more activities and so on. And so now before this Garchen Rinpoche, the current Garchen Rinpoche was born when Chinla Yongkya was still alive. He visited the future parents of the present Garchen Rinpoche. So he came to visit their home, and then the father, so Garchen Rinpoche's father, not yet to be, then prepared a bag of tsampa that he wanted to offer to Chinla Yongkyab. And Chinla Yongkyab said, I will not take that now, but in the future, you will have a good monk come to your family. You should give it to that monk that time. So, and this was the family then where Garchen Rinpoche was born in, and Chinla Yongkyab had already seen that. And so then when Rinpoche was born, so Rinpoche was maybe about 4 or 5 years old at that time. So they stayed in a place. And so Rinpoche's family was not a nomad, they were farmers. So they were planting like barley and like turnips and different grains. And then there was Trulpa in Trulpa Lote, and Trulpa's father. And he lived there, right? Mani Ratna deni kavada.
Manirna
Padi nyam
Najani Koni de Sachipari.
At the Koni nyam lere.
Actually, Tachin Rogan Yamangan Rogo, Nepal. Avanimanga.
So Trulpa Lote's father, and there was another man called Mani Ratna. And so the two of them, they lived really far away, actually in a nomad's land. So they were nomads. It's about 5 days on horseback, really far away. So So the nomads would produce different things. They would produce like milk and butter and meat and so on. So they would trade. So the farmers would trade with the nomads. And so then every year they would come, Trulpa, Lotus Father, and Maniratna, they would come to the Rinpoche's family in this area. And so Rinpoche was very young at that time, 4 or 5 years old. And so this one time, again, they came this year, and then Rinpoche he saw them coming, and he was calling for his mother, that Mother, Maniratna is coming. And then Maniratna heard that, and then Trulpa's father asked him, like, do you know this child? Have you met this child? And he said, I don't know who that is. I don't know how he knows my name. So that was one thing that they remembered at a very young age.
Marketing the Ombana Genetic Tajan Dogora, Teddy, Modayo Mari, Tajan Dogo. They congati not on the Pogachung, Gargun such at Gandu and Tongue and those on the Make Kang Conting up Pemio Marma, Pogan Taku name may cook and correct Zege on Gargon Canada. Peman, the Bochek. And I do that, such a Canada Conan. Make it there and in tongue day. My friend and Langan drawn the tongue there. Then Marvin told you, consult up, Bawa, and the Yaptan, Kanga, Mango, the Inn and Kong and Gargon can do the Kong and Zendo. Zendo, Tinny Kong, Gargon, Have, Pepdini, in Gumpo, Kong Peps along on not so Gumpo, me Gumpo, Jarama, Gumpo. 다 송제 나켄 투뇽이 계속 같으면 왜 뭐체게 다 공업 되더니 플라튼 다 가리나 젠도 공업 된 통이 공업 된 통이 공 세대에서 랩살이
At the age of 7, then Garchen Rinpoche then went to Gar Monastery. And so before he even got there, at the age of 7, he already saw in his mind exactly how it looks there, and he knew. So it's like, it's not just like in his mind. He actually is like seeing it with his eyes. He saw it. He actually saw it, but before he was actually there, he saw everything about the Gargon. He knew all about it already. And so then he was brought to Gargon by his father and mother on a horseback. And so he saw it all the time on their way there. And then when they got there, first he was received by Mahakala. Mahakala appeared to him directly and that very night. And I have to say, I've never seen Mahakala myself. And I have also never even heard Mahakala say one thing to me, and I don't know if you have, but I have not. So for Rinpoche, it was the case that that night when he arrived there, he was received by Mahakala directly. So how it is traditionally done when a Tulku arrives at the monastery. So Rinpoche was this little Tulku, and so he had a traditional reception. Many of all the monks were like lining up, and they were playing the various instruments and just made the traditional reception to lead the Lama into the monastery. And so Mahakala was among them, and he came together with them to receive Rinpoche. And so Rinpoche saw him just like a person, and he saw him and said, "Oh, here he is. Do you see him?" But nobody else saw him. It was just Rinpoche. And that's a story that Rinpoche tells us now too.
Suji and Aja, young David, Samson and Gumpok is a permanent con, Suji and tricks at Gumpok, Jazz, Yen or so on the way.
Oh, she.
She number, she don't much as sex on sex at him. And Rinpoche Tahang is a song.
So then, sometimes at the monastery they have these Lama dances, the Cham dances. So then Rinpoche would sit on his seat watching the dance, and he had his teacup in front of him on his table. And he said that sometimes Mahakala would come during these dances and kind of look into his teacup. And then Rinpoche gave him some tea, and then he would take a sip and drink some of his tea. And that happened actually quite often. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Tenita Rinpoche Pap Pepsari, Rinpoche Gumpana Pepsari, Tini Kongata, Bugati, Zemotero, Mengan, Patawa, Wanda Zaburi. Kong Game from Patawa, Wanda Zaburi, Tini, Kong Nambani, Londown, and Sari, Rinpoche. Tini Kong Pepsari, Kong Patawa, Kong Avachi use. Avachi, you were Tenita, copy in Nang Chimbon, Tenita. Out this low chimboli, Tenita, Rinpoche Tang, out the Katu, Shandro Satana, she came in Mala, the song she is, Rinpoche. Took a chung Kong, a part pets and load doing Jeta Madota, somebody. That is a race. And put a colony long yanda, they call out Nang Chimboli, Momo. Nang Chimboli, Akumari, I was it. Koran Mari. Cut part mine, I'm at the mine, what I will love it. Momo love a young Mari. I will love it. Grandma love it. I was in Koran. I grandma. In chicken, grandma love it. Grandma take Koran Nang Chimboli, they got to Shano Sadana. Nalasuno Jizeti, Yasom sitting. Mimachel, touching our strong window, touching the Kali Tabde within a cheese, a Savina Yados, in Nangatini, Dawani Giltini, Avado, strong with these. This is it for Rinpoche. What is it? Take on Chunduka. Tenny? Oh, tak not so parts and door. Do becoming young. Tenny that con the deji, tenny cons over the Yabate, the Congata, but should the Gang, some of the jazz of my Congata, some they wrote Mochi Garoshina, Comojagamai. They conquered the Luciferis, make something. Nahona, Coshandolena, Shandosari. None town Satana, Tata, Sadi, and Gangan Samari, Conto Sondom. The Tinicarena, that they chado.
So then Rinpoche was at the monastery, and so then he was about 8 years old, and there was another a boy there around the same age, Punso Wangdok. Wangdak, sorry. Punso Wangdak. And so Punso Wangdak was Rinpoche's friend, and he had a grandmother that he loved very much. She was quite old already, and he wanted to know when she's going to die. So he asked Rinpoche, please tell me when she's going to die. And so Rinpoche was 8 years old that time, and he said, okay, I will tell you. And so then sometime later, he said that, well, it's getting close now, you better make your preparations. And 2 months after he had said that, she had actually passed away. And so this is what Rinpoche did since a very young age. And when people often come to him to ask him for a mo, a divination. Normally, the lamas, when they do a mo, they do it with a mala, right? But Rinpoche, he would not use a mala at all. He would just cover his eyes with his hands and just close his eyes with his hands, and then he would just see everything that would happen. And if someone were to die, he told them that this person will die. And if someone was sick and is not to die, then he would tell them that. And it always happened the way he said it, even when he was a very young child.
Nang pep song ta maybe sa tala jura tala tini para kan tap de make make tala kan ja ya tu ge koran chini nga to ko wen chini la mo do si tu ge lo si na me tu tini ko de pa dang ta de me ja song tala ke
Trang semua. So there was always this old man who would walk around. And Rinpoche was a young Tulku still, right? He was a child, yeah. And so there was this old man who was always walking around at Gar Monastery, and it was this Sonam Punsok, right? There was Sonam Punsok. So Sonam Punsok Mayom. So anyways, he was an old man and he had some problems with his eyes. And so he would always, when he ran into Rinpoche, he would ask him for a blessing. And he said, please blow on my eyes, bless my eyes. And so then Rinpoche seems like didn't ever really respond to that. And so then one day he asked that again, please blow on my eyes. And so then that time Rinpoche said, okay, you just wait. Then he went inside and he got some ashes from the stove. And he said, show me your eyes. And then he showed eyes and he threw the ashes in his eyes. And he was like holding his eyes and it was all like red and he couldn't see, but he didn't feel it was bad or he didn't get angry. He just said, thank you. And after the burn was gone, actually his eye disease was also gone along with that.
Yang ma yo song de de ne ni ta chi bi do de lang ga de ni de ne ni kong te de ni gom ja ya nyam ni go so yin song tin ta ra ta lot ta de ta ni pa la de ni gom ni nga ke shi ni da kong gar si de su mi na ma do yin wa pa za mi ni ta nyam ni na ho is.
And he really started his meditation practice at the age of 11 or 12, something like that. And he started to learn under his father. Every time they would go somewhere on horseback, his father told him that until we reach this rock, you have to be mindful. And so then it would go on from rock to rock. He would start to practice mindfulness. And then when he reached the rock, then he had to reach the next rock with mindfulness. And that's when he started to practice mindfulness. And ever since, up until today, has been so many years, Rinpoche has spent his life in practice. Sometimes maybe he has some things to do, but aside from that, he is never distracted. And I know that I always see him, he's really always meditating.
Dinje ta tini pala chemise tini khani khong ta ko sam yug go song ma ko som cham 너 저거니 요 사람한테는 너 다책 다 시가마도 요라리 마송송송 되니 다 건선나 저기 되니 대콩 다음에 욕대 값서 되니 콩 아자 매 승모 중앙으로 대가 보지라고 보지 대콩가 맹나 보지 라고 보지 대다 공양 야긴게다 야긴가 아마게 제와인저 빼 남치 모시게리지 고세야가 까리나 데라 콘티니 빼치보고 있대 되니 콩
아마게 제와 rumpuche 야
야겠지 아마게 제와인 송그리지 되니 되니 콩게 수자 짱니 되는데 인사르바 수자 짱니 되는데 되니 뭐체가 다 세랑 수자 메인 아워 컬마송 메인 가레세는 말니 메인 하나 컬메온데 되니 보지게 치랑 나 아크그 니만다나 마도 근데마도 수자 이게 말 치랑 가레세네 또 되게리시 그런 설니 당동스가 뭐체가 되니 또 수자한테 그런데 되니
뭐라라
되니 뭐체가 다 욕바치 신대고 야도 수자 걸사
가르고 잘해
네, 네 그렇죠. 내거 야르와.
가인사나 콘디 가보면도.
네, 말이 다 보지랑 알센 당본다는 요게 진짜 거거 야래.
가인사나 코 수자 먹어더니 뭐 어쩌 야르와.
아니 수자 말이 수자 안 컬마 성을. 콩간 거고 너 저랑 서북던 가레스는 저 차성을. 세대나고 why you delay? Yeah, I need early. And me 보지 그제나 나는 아크데나 그런 거 아크가 뭐지가 아크 간니다 콘손 참도도 이만다나 마도 수자 이게 말이 지랑 가레세 또 되기리라서 너무시 되니 콩
아크데 갈지도
아크 건삼다 약도 아크간이 콩 수잔다나 이만다나 마도 늘릉하고 이게 말이라고 너무시 되니 뭐지가 대랑 아는 좀 주인데 냐이나도
아니 그냥 같이 도 먹고
아치 그 말이 아크 남중 수자 대리마도 이게 말이
콩고가 말해 되는 거
남중 통거 말이 지랑 가리세는 하원들 나가도
되니 뭐 제라 랩스마 되니 되니 뭐 돌아드니
뭐 지금 단단 이 조바체 그래 근데 거 야리
so then die Kutzam-Schulbe gab Rinpoche was then around 19 or so, or around 20, and so that he started a 3-year retreat, but in total he only completed about 1.5 years. But so while he was still in the retreat, in the beginning of the retreat, so he was in his room, and his younger sister, would bring him the tea. Morang di geva des kung samra.
Yauka amagitio.
Morang.
Mote. Mena pochila.
Pachirang. Pochi. So her name is Pochi, and Rinpoche she always thought that she is the rebirth.
Mochi the money. Mochi yabin get to do la gari. Sungin the soy hakoma song young. Magichevari. Hakoma song.
So yeah, Rinpoche's father thought that she is the rebirth of Rinpoche's father's mother, so Rinpoche's grandmother, right? So that's why he would always treat her really well and give her a good clothes to her and so on. And so she was bringing him tea for his retreat. And then there was another uncle, Ganyen. He also was in retreat elsewhere. And now when she was preparing to bring tea for Rinpoche, the uncle said that, he doesn't drink tea too early, so you don't have to go there too early. So then she came a little bit later than intended. And when she got there, and she came with the teapot and offered it to Rinpoche. And then Rinpoche was a bit angry at her, and he said, "What are you doing here so late? I'm waiting for you. You're way too late." And so then he was angry, and the pot is made of clay, right? I guess. Of clay. So he, in his rage, he chopped off the how do you call it, that part? We call it the lip in Tibetan. the spout of the pot. So then it was broken off.
디 갑레트니 시미도제 공간 그 공가다 하양나 주의하죠. 되니 너너지 약보제 공 낭송송아. 되니
시미도제 공기.
시민도제 그 낭이데 너뭐 제를 보고도 단참을 요 난디. 되니 공가다 티난 자코나 산디. 되니 다 일바테 나왕산제 남과도 그게 야. 나왕산제라. 일바제나니 마친데나 대 자마. 자 칼라종이 히라종 공게티니 티난 때효요 말이 나왕산제 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 되니 공 되니 메테티니
디코제게 mendo라
티난나 다 사반티나 내가 다 인증민디 디 처차송이 티난나 때데 티는 뭐 저게 다 니나 자티 강요리 자자마 강요로와
차샤바데
자 니나는 요리 되니 뭐 저게 나베다 마치다 통사 강반들레 제가 때선 토거리 단 뭐 공갈 뭐지겠다 비공나 마요가 여기하더니 나 탕나 만나 작사때 탕나리 때 코랑 만들 아리요 근데 난 쳐야 넣어요 말이
디니마 셴바라 제마 디니모티 마라 고야니모티 마라
말이
제마 그래서 나 상디라 마송아
상디라 그러면 되니 말아도 되니 뒤뒤라 트랭다시도 양자기 이제 나가 신거요 공 다른 뭐지 펩찬에로 껴사지라 공네 네비티 공게들이 공대지 때나 공게들 이 공게도 대철랑 되니 대성능 나 총도나 다너 뭐지 같은 통khí 용 나랑 간 도그면 와 다 근데 탕나 잡선 한번 잡아 쳐 말로 되니 그 공게 되니 미나도다 다지 자지 남 고라지야 되니 때선 통 되니 대비 파 되니 자마도 살아가 그래서 단마 역사란 벨레 토거리 장 나카신 거요 네토를 다른 피테 좀 사다른 토거리
the second floor down
second floor 여기 역사 때 second floor 이게 second one floor는 벨레 토거리 어떻게 마 여기
공기 통송아
다른 생인데 생자시요 공가
계랑 토마토 공기 통송
말이 만날 때도 요 말하는 티분 아무튼 데 테니 지나 바다 든든 다다 든든 마퉁이 나촌데니 되게 되게 자만데 말이요 사게 자만이 되니 든든 퉁이 마차니다 지나 봤어요 에스
So then he not chopped off the spout of the clay pot, the tea pot, and so then there was another teapot that the older Dojim had given him, and it was made of like a metal, like copper, and Rinpoche really actually liked that, and so. That was he really wanted to actually have that one, but he didn't get it because it was not the best. So he really the whole idea in Rinpoche's mind of like destroying the other one is he really wanted to have the copper one, and so then but the one who was really in charge of what kind of pot Rinpoche served in. Not Rinpoche's tea served in was the treasurer and also cook. Called was it Ngawang Sangye, and so he insisted. So the treasurer / cook, he insisted that no, it cannot be the copper pot, because he thought that the other pot is better and Rinpoche likes it more, which was not the case. So he said you must offer the tea in the clay pot, even if the spout is broken. So then she brought it back in the broken clay pot the next time. And so it was filled. The pot was filled with tea, and Rinpoche didn't want that pot, right? So he was angry that he got that sodded pot again. So he took that pot and he threw it out of the window. And so they were actually in the second floor, so higher than this one. So he threw the pot filled with tea out of the second floor, and it landed on the ground it didn't. So it's made out of clay. It didn't break, and not a single drop of the tea was spilled too, even though the pot was already broken to begin with, but nothing spilled. It was filled to the brim, and it landed just like someone would just place it there. And so there was this one elder Lama, Tsering Dojim. He passed away 10 years after Rinpoche had left Tibet, but he was the one who saw it. He was there when it fell down, and he saw this pot landing in front of him. And so then he picked it up and he placed it onto his crown and took some of the tea as a blessing, and then he brought it into the kitchen as a blessing for the others as well. So that's the pot miracle. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Donkey is a pomba.
It's like a mule, huh?
Mule. New to the Poyo, Pombola Poyo, Potam.
Right.
Giga part of Pombola. New to us. Can you take the Mambo, you compact and look at console genie, Yamata Kong Dilla short the day. Then Rinpoche hang a pepside, Rinpoche. Then you control Trabatamchi, such a tennis church young. such as Ningaka Satana, Nidera, and Antin Rotok Maride. Tawakashi, Tawat Sotek Tarayo. And they did me, Natsunaka Satana, pass, such as the Naritan needed any, consort Sanang, Name, Namalan, Alan, Rodotini, Denny, Tarambuch Papet, and Butch Tarson. Gargo and I consort and Anador. Then any Jani door on the Tutini consort in a top bed. And what you call Manu, Tavatas.
Oh,
Jakazon.
Rinpoche, the
Rinpoche can Sumana.
Hakotara, that's younger.
That's Conga Rinpoche Gonsari, that Jambon.
Tandro is a Tandro.
The Rumba to pass a sort of young, young such a chick like young Tanita and Tina daughter, some I the day, Ni could.
Rinpoche Made,
Rinpoche Made,
Tavan Made.
Then he's at Jakazon. Tinitinanta, connect that, DJ Ura, DJ Uritara data, pay connect jacket or the Marico de Us on the or take a tiny Rinpoche Nabza Chasa, the Conte, did it Tardino, Sira, Monchigo.
And I didn't make
Matario Mari, did Tarson and Botinambo. Nabzat.
So Rinpoche then was only in retreat for a year and a half, and then he was sent to prison. And so when he was just coming out of that short retreat, so there was a request for him to go to some village to do a retreat, a practice there. And so then he went there, and he agreed to do puja for 5 days there, and he went there with a few monks. And so then when they stayed there at night, then his robe was lifted up, maybe it was Achi or so, but Rinpoche knew that it's time to go. So he felt that like the communists are coming closer. He just knew it, and he said, we have to go. And so he left right away, and he took 1 or 2 monks with him, and he told the others to come right away. And so then the others went on loaded the mules, and so Rinpoche had already left, and they loaded their mules, and so then they went in the same direction to catch up with Rinpoche. But then they arrived in that place where BuNima's father is from. I forgot the name. Nyingaka, right? So then they arrived there kind of in the evening, and they felt, now we can't really walk at night, let's just take a break here. But Rinpoche did actually tell them, don't stop, you have to go straight. But then it was late and dark, so they decided to stay. So they decided, and then they continued their journey just before sunrise. And so then they ran into the communists, the Chinese, and they were arrested and put into prison. But then, so all of the monks were then arrested, but the mule then continued walking, and the mule was carrying Rinpoche's robes. And so Rinpoche then, he still got his robes in the end.
Rinpoche tini pala phep ne sangha che Rinpoche phep chale te mi ke dike to korang ke ji to sungji te ji no no te ko ka Rinpoche nyampo to kondo.
Because Rinpoche was already long gone, but there were still some footprints, and so the mule was smelling at the footprints, and it recognized that it was Rinpoche, and so it would just follow that smell, and then so finally it would find Rinpoche.
Rinpoche jak mazong pa de ti nyampo. Ne ti te tin sungsa te mi yawo Rinpoche mada ma pha me shesong ne ti tu la Rinpoche la phu da ra. Yabo Rinpoche ki ma zhong song ma ti tu. Zhong song. Ma che. Yabo Rinpoche chung chung de ma zhong song. Ni te la phu re. Te di phu no Rinpoche de ni.
So then the mule stayed with Rinpoche until Rinpoche himself was arrested. And so then also, just before that, there was Gyalpo Rinpoche's mother. She passed away when Gyalpo Rinpoche was quite young, so that was just at that time. So then Rinpoche, when she passed away, then Rinpoche offered the mule to her family.
Oh, Rinpoche teni ta di jap te zongkhang na zong char te zongkhang na zong ne ta seleng zongkhang na ni ta Rinpoche ti loji nang tra mangbo dara te teni tina na man thu pa teni ta khone ke mi ta zongkhang na ni ta le ka le go ta ta zongkhang na le ka le che sun ju ko ma zo ren ju de te chang teni dangbo ta zong ba mangbo control la ta dangbo ka ni control la ko dangbo control la Ninji Gari Yakada consoling it, Gari don't not take on Kali. Then it done the Sava, the Gora, bread, David, the things, Marin, go, the Chiranga go to go. The Chiranga go to go to go Jajane. I'm not so Marin, the Galim, the sort of thing. Then it don't check a tambo correct and Mokote. May Gari go to that tambo tell la ropa. They could at it, correct it. I go, they correct. Jima la de Grisia, Zongkang. Then it did Kimpom Masaka. Then Kimpom Masaka Konga Lamari. Then Kimpom Masaka Connect, Kimpom Masaka Jarva. Then it Kongata, Kimpom Masaka and Bochin Garchen Rinpoche, Abi Songri. Abita, Mama change it in Sancho, some Chimbori, some Konga, Tamo Yankala Jan, into the end of the race. They some kinder Kimpom Masaka.
Logite.
Kempo Masaka, our song de, men Cicero, Kempo Masaka, Garchina Bocha Corner, Garchina Bocha Sugamari, Gar Rinpoche, some monkey, Abi song. That Abi, Mama change it in Sancho, somebody, so Tamon and Cardian to this area, Kona Batalo, Nishan, Yapo Yoga, Kempo Jordan, Yawin, that to upset.
So Rinpoche was then in the prison in Xining, and you've probably heard many of his stories in prison. Maybe one story you haven't heard was that it was really a labor camp. So the prisoners all had to work, do a lot of very hard physical labor all day long. And so, for example, they had to dig in the ground. And there were various kind of tools to dig, different kinds of shovels and different kind of tools. And Rinpoche would always first kind of check it out and see which of the tools would be the easiest one, the better one, and which one would be the more, the less preferred tool. And so once he had figured out which one the people usually did not prefer because it was difficult to work with, then he would pick that one for himself. And would always let the others take the more useful, easy to use tools. Or sometimes they had to stack bricks. So everyone was given a pile of bricks that they had to stack. And Rinpoche would always look around and see who has kind of some difficulties with the physical labor. And he would always go there first and help them stack their bricks. And then when everybody was helped, then finally he would start with his own task of piling his own bricks, stacking his bricks. And actually that story was told by Khenpo Münse Rinpoche, whom I have also met. Khenpo Münse Rinpoche he always called Garchen Rinpoche Abe, which is like kind of a dear nickname. So when he told me that story, he said that, and so Khenpo Münse spent 20 years with Rinpoche together in prison, and he was Rinpoche's guru. And so when he told me that story, Khenpo Münse said,
story the Majima candidate. And Khenpo Münse the Kongsang somebody.
And so Khenpo Münse said that Abe, meaning Garchen Rinpoche, is a real bodhisattva. So the story was somebody else told that story. But I guess in relation to that, Khenpo Münse then said Garchen Rinpoche or Abe is a real bodhisattva, and he joined his hands in prayer like that.
They did that, Dojim and Ogolita, Chapa Mambo Tagre, Yaka, Chapa Mambo Tange, Tangato, Langa Taran Mondogo, the Chapa Sachajima, Chapa Dam and Dunduji in the whole Natsuna, the Gurum Yedokuana, Natus, Sacha de Motive, God, shouldn't Chapa and Natal 10 millions. Navatin. It's a peptide tongue out to the shop so. Some kind of peptide download you.
And Trulpa Togoria.
Trulpa. That's young job Takarin.
Shambali Chilara.
So, Lama Mambo.
So then when Rinpoche was released from prison, about 2 years later, so at that time I was already his attendant, and people would invite Rinpoche often to go to their villages to hold pujas there. And so there was, again, this one time where he was invited. Actually, many great lamas went for that. Many lamas traveled from elsewhere. And it was in summertime, and we had to go on horseback, of course. And in summertime, it rains a lot in Tibet, so there was a heavy rainfall, and then it gets very hard to pass the roads. And the only place where Rinpoche Rinpoche was able to stop the rain where we were going, and it was almost like it was raining everywhere, exactly not where we were walking through. It was like having an umbrella right above our heads. So Rinpoche was able to stop the rain as we went along, wherever we went.
空他你去处你是照见人对不对？你嘛这个俺罗特萨马里嘎不来卡看到空过去了双样个嘛哩。
So in Kham, in that area, Rinpoche did a lot of group chants and retreats, about 12, 13 a year. And so there was a lot of puja going on every day, most of the days. And so at daytime, Rinpoche would spend doing puja, different retreats, and at night, he would go around visiting people, whoever would invite him. Sometimes somebody would be very sick or somebody had died, and they invited him to come for a puja ceremony, and he would always go. He would never say, I'm not going, and not only one family. It's not like he went to stay in one family's home one night and then another night. In one night, he would go here and there and all over the place. So basically, he was really running around for others, either doing puja or visiting people's homes to help them, really around the clock, 24 hours. And there has not been a single time where Rinpoche said, today I'm not going, I'm tired, and so on. He would always go, whoever asks him to.
Mari kaola then jopa yora then tani korang the tin do it something at the tractor or tractor dina pay with tractor the living college the mario rachoni zone that then na pay go with sinango
tractor the
tractor
korang dog mara
mari the magic ongoro tractor the machine oh the na pay go with it pesa Santa Garguni Santina map, Penayang, Nepal, Young, Nalang, Yan names to do in the Perulis. Penda mine at that, Naning Tevini Jindaji Nasoma, Tevini Jindaji Nasom, Danga, so Chutoni, Jinda, Chutot Jimbati Jindati Nasum, the name Moranta Yang Nasatan Maria. Non te Singapore nida. Nico and the Peran, the Toyati to Yala Sagori, data, Nebatel, so Sanabia, nay, Tenita young Don Pado, any young city peasant, to Yel Papago, to do in the dark of the Simchin Dona. Is
that don't Tinimola Wang
Antinimo one.
So then
the courting so that the Timin Jimda Tang, Homa Consola, Ganyan Tatai, Lamisi, Hakoga Marisi. That Singapore is for Pekol. Singapore is perilous and Mochi. Hakoma. Majestica Lama, Malap Song.
Namtala Young Chomara.
May Namtanka Hakogama control Gara in Ganyin and Rinpoche get Soma Tamti Semti Sigari, somewhere Rinpoche that Kale Kado, the Rinpoche take a mass on Sondo. Oh, to do it.
So then the way Rinpoche would travel around was either on horseback or how you would call it. It's like kind of like it's almost like it sounds like it's a wheelbarrow, but it's pulled by a cow. Like it was not a chariot too, obviously, but it's like a little cart that's pulled by a cow. So he would travel like that, or he would go in a tractor, and somebody else would then drive the tractor. And so this is how he would go around, and he would spend the nights going here and there. And in the morning, he'll be back just in time for the puja at the monastery. So this is how he was going around, non-stop, day and night. And maybe a more recent story was when we were in Singapore. And so at that time, Rinpoche had a student in Taiwan who he was a very close student of his. And she fell ill at that time with the mad cow disease. And So that's when Rinpoche heard about it when he was in Singapore, and he was really worried about her, and he wanted to go see her and bless her and do prayers for her, but he was in Singapore, and so then he took a secret trip from so the day he left in Singapore, we still had a program. So secretly, he left on a flight to Taiwan, which is an over 4-hour flight. So he asked everyone, don't tell anyone I'm going, because then people will be worried that he's taking this hardship on, because the next day he already had program in Singapore again. So that day he left too. So he left that evening, flew to Taiwan 4 hours to see the sick person, to bless her, do prayers for her. And then he went back 4 hours flight. And then he just came in time for the next program, where the people were already waiting for him in the temple. And he didn't want anyone to know that that's what he was doing at that time. Tini kung Rinpoche in the rimdo to la consequitang sunga.
Rimdo to.
Kai sinan tran netil to amanda to
sunga. Tin tatanan samjong ta to sunni ri tati. Dante mado. Ni gonga shwe yi tatanan samjong ya ta dia.
So there's one time
Antonita tinita 강이 있으나 되니 쪼보네다 소수다 같이는 존안에 된 나니 등 같이는 뭐지 되니 상충선 받지는 지다들 된발이 되니 초초게다 되나 림보체는 레와 톡세 되니 치랑 속에 쌈노 똥치나 되니 단지 되니 동메인 은혜 담절다 다른 데인데 논이 되니 고추 추발이 나랑 큰 상관도 지나베더니 대공코 요담 미시 소소게 다른 뭐지 계속 가져제 냠니는 나한테는 되니 저랑 저다 메시 다 동생도 그 말이 되니 되는 거랑 그 카트 저 되니 다 Any tashi de le shines. Moche song yang di tat nyam nang.
So one time also in Tibet, we are going from, we were in, Poshonka, anyways, it's a... Oh, sorry. Yeah. So there were two things about, so the first one was when Rinpoche was going to Bamako. His mother used to stay there. And so Rinpoche's mother used to live in Bamako, right? And so there was a kind of a river, and there was no bridge, however. In the past, so in the past there was a bridge, but it was destroyed by the water. So it was basically there was no functional bridge there. And so then, were you there then or not? You were there or not? You were there, right? Yeah. BuNima Lama also was there. Yeah. Rinpoche was BuNima Lama was there. So anyways, they came. There were quite a few people, a lot of people, and so they all kind of got stuck there. A lot of people got stuck there. Nobody could cross that river because the bridge was destroyed. There was no bridge to cross. And so Rinpoche, he picked up some earth, some sand from the ground, and he recites some mantra, and then he blew on that sand, and then he threw it in the sky, and then in an instant all the water kind of moved aside, and it's also stopped raining, and everybody could just pass, just walk basically through where the river was. And everybody saw that, everybody was there, and I was there too. And then another story was, second one was also in summertime, close to Gar Monastery. What is it, Poshonka, right? In Poshonka. It was close to Gar Monastery. And so there were a lot of, in summertime, it rains a lot. There's a lot of thunderstorms, and actually quite a lot of people get killed by being struck by lightning. Every summer happens, every year that happens. And so there was this place where it was kind of infamous, an infamous place for that to happen. And so there was this one time again where a Gelugpa Lama was there and two other people, a man and a woman. And then there was a thunderstorm, and the lightning struck the two people, the man and the woman, they both died. And the Gelugpa Lama had a hat on, and his hat got burned by the heat of the electricity, but he didn't die. But it was a very inauspicious thing happening, and so therefore people in the area invited Garchen Rinpoche to come there to do some puja. And so then, actually, if we had come a little bit early and BuNima Lama was with Rinpoche attending him, so if it was a little bit before, then we would have also been killed by the lightning. There was quite a kind of monstrous thunderstorm happening there at that time too, when we were traveling there. And so then they traveled, Garchen Rinpoche and BuNima Lama, they traveled through this kind of valley, and like on the way, they encountered a man who seemed to be waiting for Rinpoche, and he was wearing like a white kind of like wool, like a sheep wool kind of sheep wool, right? Like a white sheep wool cloak, like kind of it's like a cloak, right? Or like a chupa basically. So you kind of bind it at the waist too, and it's like a chupa, like a male Tibetan chupa, made out of white sheep wool, and he was holding a white kata in his hand, and just basically waiting for Rinpoche to come. And I was also there, and I saw him, and I instantly thought, this is not a. So he was
ဖူးရောက်
holding.
တဲ့တိုင်းဖူးရောက်တဲ့တူရမိုချေတဲ့ဆုံးမှာဆုံးတဲ့ခုံတဲ့ဆုံးခါထမှာတော့ဒီရွတ်တဲ့တော့မှာရွတ်တဲ့တူတဲ့
So what BuNima Lama saw was just the kadak. He was just holding the kadak. But what Garchen Rinpoche told him later, but what BuNima Lama didn't see, what Rinpoche saw, was that when he offered that kadak to Rinpoche, that it was not only a kadak, but inside, Rinpoche said there was a lightning bolt that had become kind of, oh, here's Rinpoche.
Đá bà lâu quá.
What's he doing here? It's perfect. So the lightning bolt that had turned into a piece of like metal, but it was a lightning bolt. And that lightning bolt was offered to Rinpoche by this man. And so then when BuNima saw the man, he was sure that's not a human being, that he didn't look like a normal person. And actually, so BuNima Lama remembered that it is told that there are certain local gods and protectors, and the way you recognize them is also by how they are dressed. And he was wearing the dress of that mountain god as it was described. So that's how BuNima Lama recognized him as the mountain god. He was he was not a normal person, and definitely, and basically the reason why he was waiting for Rinpoche was to tell him that now he's not going to cause any harm in that area. And so then Rinpoche was able to go there and do the puja, and of course many beings were saved that way. And so anyways, we are over time, so we stop here with the stories. But so what's most important to know is that Garchen Rinpoche really is a true bodhisattva. And all of you who know him, who are somehow connected to him, if you know how to really think well, basically if you are smart, then you will make good use of your precious human body, which is very difficult to find. Then you would make the best of that while you have it. At least that's what I'm doing. And if you are smart as well, then you would practice whatever Rinpoche tells you to practice. And one thing I can guarantee you is that if you practice what Rinpoche tells you to practice, then I can guarantee you your life will not be wasted. And so also Garchen Rinpoche, he always wears the same robe at day and at night. It's not that he has like a pajama or something that he wears at night where he changes sometimes. Whatever he wears at daytime, that's what he wears at night. And in the past, he would always sit all night long. He would sit up straight, never lie down. Maybe now in America, sometimes he does lie down, but he would never lie down. Dashidelek.
Yeah. Going up.
Sorry, we're late.